Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Rates and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I will be joined here shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. Tonight, very important, pertinent topic. We are going to be joined by Mr. Jeff Hall. Um, Jeff Hall is kind of I'm going to affectionately dub Jeff our resident loss prevention guy. I'm because Jeff specializes in loss prevention and cargo theft, trailer. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to get into. There's been several incidences going on around the country, and absolutely there has been an epidemic. I think with the whole thing of rerouting freight, which Jeff will definitely, we're going to talk about all of that stuff. So if you got any questions, concerns, you can join us by jumping into the chat. You can type your questions into the chat. If you're watching us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, you can join. You can type your questions into the chat, and we will see them, and we'll definitely involve those questions or comments into the conversation tonight. If you would, just a little bit of housekeeping as well. Please like, share, and subscribe. That helps us get to a broader algorithm into the whatever the whole algorithm thing, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, or whatever it's on. It helps us out tremendously if you would definitely do so. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the little bell icon. That gets you notified whenever we drop new content or we go live. You will get notified if you hit the little bell icon. So if you would do those things for us, we would greatly appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, tell a friend about the show. The broader audience that we get to, the more people that we might be able to help and maybe share some information with that may give them more tools in their toolbox. I think the quicker we can try to do our part in turning around the trucking economy right now. But with that being said, and without any further ado, let me welcome my co-host into the show, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good evening, Chuck. How are you?
We're doing well, Rico. How you doing?
I'm much better now. I'm much better now. But
congratulations.
I think it's a timely time to have Jeff on with us because of all the stuff that is definitely happening throughout the country with
throughout the continent. It's in America, you're not the only ones having it. We've got it real bad up in Canada. Cargo theft, especially where we are here in Southern Ontario. It's Jeff will attest to that because he does some work up here. It's problematic. It really is.
Yeah, and so I don't want to belabor the point and do a whole bunch of talking myself. Let's go ahead and welcome Jeff into the show. We let our here on the Rates and Lanes podcast. We rather let our experts do most of the talking, and we try to sit back and learn as much as we possibly can. So good evening, Jeff. How are you this evening?
Very well, Rico. Chuck, it's always a pleasure to join you guys. I'm honored and
great
it's
to have you on
see
again.
it. Thank you.
It's perfect timing, as Rico said. I know that freight is getting stolen all over this continent, and I know that truckers are having a tough time right now. Just if nobody steals their truck or their freight, you add on the additional costs that they have to bear when somebody drives off with one of their trucks loaded with one of their customers' loads, and a lot of times it'll put people over the brink.
No doubt. I mean, that's why I've always got kind of I look at most drivers probably differently than other people do. I don't always suspect a driver of cargo theft. And as a matter of fact, in my experience, drivers rarely are involved. They're just doing their job. They're out trying to earn a living. Now, sometimes, granted, they don't make good decisions. If you park your, an FTL with no lock on the public street and hope it's going to be there the next morning, is not good sense. But they're not thieves. They're just not using their heads. But these guys, for the most part, are hardworking guys that don't get a whole lot of breaks. I mean, hell, they show up to a facility that 5 minutes late for their appointment. They're told to come back the next day, so they got to kill time. It's a tough job. And like I said, if they have a piece of equipment taken or their entire rig, I mean, hell, they've got notes to pay on that. And the longer they go without their equipment, like like Muhammad or like Rico just knows have one in the shop, you're not making any money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, buddy. Yeah, and that is
If you're
definitely
not
true.
turning, you're not, you're not earning.
Right.
Exactly.
So, Jeff, what seems to be like we were talking a little bit before we came on live. What seems to be the number one thing? I guess maybe the top three items that maybe that you guys are dealing with right now when it comes to things being stolen, or not necessarily things being stolen, but what seems to be the top three things that our people are doing out there as far as things that we need to be aware of.
You mean the types of theft or the commodities
Yes,
involved?
but well, let's do both.
Okay. Well, types of theft. There's no doubt that what's taken to the apex here lately has been what we call strategic uh, misdirection of freight or fictitious pickup, where typically loads are placed on the load board, and a bad actor can go in there and steal somebody's identity and bid on the load. And what the twist we've been seeing that's happening all the time now is, rather than having them all bad guys, what the bad guy will do is he will actually get the load and then hire a legitimate driver that has no idea what's going on, and not send him the original BOL. What he'll do is send him a fake or remade rate confirmation that'll have the same shipper but a different consignee. And we're seeing that a lot on shipments that are going out of, especially Southern California, going to Laredo, Texas, or Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And like I said, they'll be picked up at the original shipper, but then the consignees will be to a local cross dock somewhere in the Inland Empire, like Rialto or San Bernardino, Riverside, Miraloma, Ontario. And we see that all the time. That's just, as I was telling you guys earlier, we're seeing about 4 to 6 of those cases every single week we're getting. And the commodities involved, the top commodity that we're seeing is solar panels.
Wow.
Is a number one thing, but I think it makes a lot of sense because we know the cartels using them across the border for grow houses. Plus, we also, just with the local political flavor, I mean, look how much has been pushed in our country domestically that haven't put on your house.
Right.
So the demand for those are great, and because it took us a while to figure that out, but we're seeing that definitely being tops. And then
I never would have imagined
Yeah,
solar panels would have been the number one item.
and then also, like you guys mentioned earlier, we were talking alcohol is also going up there. We're seeing bourbon, we're seeing vodka stolen in different states. Of course, electronics always are, but you have to understand when these guys steal, sometimes it's easy for them. If they see a certain address, they might Google and go, "Oh shoot, that's the 3PL for a General Electric." Well, they know it's going to be electronics load, but a lot of times they can't always tell
What type?
what's being shipped out. So that's why we see a lot of times they might pick up something of value. Like we've had a load of fabric that was picked up worth $150,000, but once they picked it up and took it, had their driver go pick it up, it sat in a warehouse and they never sent anybody in to pick it up because it's something they didn't value, even though the monetary value of it was pretty high. But I think at that same time, they had this same trucker go over and pick up 2 Bitcoin servers that were both worth $3 million apiece. Those got picked up, taken to the legit warehouse, and they sent a bad guy trucker the next day to get those. So we're seeing a lot when it comes to recoveries. The guys out in Southern California have been doing a great job, and they're almost making recoveries, it seems like, every day, because they're going to these different cross docks, and what they're seeing is something gets stolen, and they might go in there for one reason, but then when they get there, they see something. Probably the best example is there's a printing company that was targeted because the printing cartridges are a very, very valuable commodity on the secondary market. They can sell them at flea markets all day long, or that'll be printers. Well, what they did when they went in, they got these bedazzling machines. Well, hell, they had no use for those. So when we recovered them, they were in a warehouse being warehoused, pristinely palletized and still shrink wrapped, but they're just sitting there because they couldn't sell those. But they had no idea what they were picking up. They just thought because they were going to a printer manufacturer, they were going to get printers or print cartridges. Right. So they're taking some risk, but they don't care. They're going to take something, and more often than not, they're getting goods that are of pretty high value.
Wow.
Yeah, that's wild. Man, I never would have thought solar panels. I'm still kind of baffled by that one. But to see somebody, so are they're having somewhat success on recovering some of these things, or is most of the time is this stuff just gone in the wind?
Well, as this has been going on for a while, we know of about 50 cross docks in the Inland Empire where goods are being taken. Well, most of these guys that run these are playing both sides of the fence. They know that they're taking in product that bad guys are bringing them, that they're storing temporarily, and then they're picked up and by the bad guys. But yet, when law enforcement comes in and says, "Hey, was this load here?" All of a sudden they become very, very cooperative. So it's just like any other informant, as you guys well know. Most of the times, we're getting half truths, but half truths better than no truth. They're playing both sides of the fence,
Right.
and that's what's going on here. But what goes on is that the ideal scenario, and we've had a lot of success with this, is a lot of times a broker might send a trucker to go pick up a load. Well,
Right.
en route, he may realize there's something's just not right. They tried to call, the guy's answer his phone. So then they might call the shipper and say, "Hey, don't load that truck." And they'll say, "Well, it's too late. He's already picked up." Well, at that time, it's essential that the broker get a police report filed immediately. And we had this out in Southern California 2 weeks ago. We recovered a load of some Mattel product that was some Barbie dolls or Barbie product from the movie. Not necessarily such a high value load, I think it was around 100 grand, but the uniqueness of it made it a very, very coveted load.
Right.
So that exact same scenario happened. So we just got very fortunate. We told the broker, said, get a police report filed immediately. And the thing to do is you've got to contact the point of origin, because you have to assume that the intent was to steal when they walked after the dock. So that's where the police report needs to be filed. So they contacted their local jurisdiction. We knew a woman in that department that was very sympathetic to our needs. She got a police report filed within 30 minutes. That way we could share and bring in law enforcement from another venue. So called them, they went over, intercepted the load, and we got their load back. Now, had that got there and set, we know the bad guys continued to feed the broker propaganda. "Oh yeah, we're over there now." And they even sent pictures of a trailer with product in it, that just to say, "No, we're there right now," which we knew they were lying. But that's how close that came, that they came to getting that load. And that's happened 3 or 4 times recently. But like I said, the key is getting that police report filed. And the main reason is because what happens if police show up and let's say something goes south, heaven forbid, something bad happens, like somebody might get shot or something. Their supervisors are going to go, what are you guys doing over there? Do you have a police report number? Oh, no. Well, so they have to have a reason to be there. Thus, that's the importance of getting a police report filed. Plus, the other thing, if we go there and we find the stolen product, we can't claim it if it's not been reported stolen. So
Right.
it's twofold. There's the police report, and we just had our annual cargo theft conference sponsor that's put on by Travelers and CargoNet in Monrovia last week. We had over 250 people there. As a matter of fact, Mark Haywood from Peel was there, from your guys' neck of the woods. And we talked about this a lot. I mean, we emphasized over and over again the importance of filing a police report, because you really can't do anything until that gets done. Then that opens up a whole new world once that gets done. And most of the departments anymore are getting more and more sympathetic. Even some now are allowing, like say that the company that's a victim, they're allowing them to make a telephonic police report for maybe Connecticut and call Fontana PD, and they can do it telephonically, which is a big help.
So I want to take a step back and kind of cover some stuff. Go back for just a second, Jeff. You were saying that earlier that some of these companies, some people are, what they're doing is, some of the bad guys are doing is that they're actually booking a load from a broker and hiring a legitimate motor carrier to go in there and pick the load up, but they're changing the information as far as the correct pickup number, the correct pickup place, but they're giving them a different delivery location.
Correct.
And
so they're doing it as a blind shipment, basically. They're saying to the driver, "Listen, I know it's going to say that it's supposed to go to to Kroger groceries in Michigan. The shipper thinks it is, but it's really, this guy buys hair product and it's going to his warehouse. That's where it's really going. So don't say anything, and we'll send you the real bill of lading," which is very common in the trucking business, is blind shipments where the shipper thinks it's going one place and legitimately. I know years ago we used to move chemicals like that, where they thought it was going to, they thought it was going to one company and it was really coming up to Canada, or vice versa. I have a question for you though, Jeff. Could a lot of this theft be avoided if the shippers themselves would get on board and practice some due diligence, such as, number one, take photographs of the truck, the license plate, the trailer, trailer, right, and also the driver's ID. You're giving, really what you're doing, whether it's $100,000 worth of whiskey or $250,000 worth of solar panels, you're giving somebody that you don't know all this money basically in product, and you're saying, here, go and deliver it, and they may not ever be seen again.
Well, Chuck, you're a smart guy, and you're exactly right. Your experience is coming through. We preach that all the time. The reality of it is, though, what I've always said, yes, all that should be done, and the shippers that do that are the biggest asset we have, because if they take a picture of the truck, they get a trailer number, they get a license plate number, they get the placard information, so we can run the MC. Because that's what happened on that load I was just telling you about the Barbie dolls, is when that trucker left, luckily the shipper got all that information, so we were able to track that driver down and said, hey, where did you take that load? And he was
Right.
like, he was an honest trucker. I took it right here. There was no, he wasn't trying to lie to us. And had we not been able to do that, then we would never recover that load. I had one on the other day that happened the same thing. That took me all day to locate the driver, because it ingeniously gave him a fake driver's license of a legitimate guy.
Right.
When I finally tracked him down, he's like, Jeff, I've never been over there. I've never made a delivery there. So then I had to go back and start reviewing film again. And so, no, there's our guy. And it was a different guy. And then when I finally tracked him down, the load had a tracking device in it. And don't get me started on this, but I didn't agree with how the tracking device was. It was one that was first pallet in, last pallet off,
Right.
but didn't activate and give us a GPS hit until it was out of the trailer. Well, they went in and found the GPS and dismantled it. So we knew we were activated. We knew what was going on, but we had nowhere to go. That's how close we came to recovering that load.
Wow.
But since we didn't know where it was at, we were dead in the water. So, but no, getting back to the dock procedures, yes, no doubt that would eliminate a lot of it. But some of these places, as you well know, the trucking industry has always been a very casually based and run business.
Yes.
And these people are there to move freight. And when they see something where the guy's got the proper paperwork, even though there could be some red flags, they don't give it a second thought. I mean, I don't know how to get around it unless every dock in America had like a compliance officer, that every load that comes back, he's there taking down the tractor, or the rig information, tractor and trailer, both the license plate numbers and the unit numbers, and take a picture of the driver's license. A lot of that would eliminate what's going on, but there's just no consistency in the industry with that best practice.
Well,
I'm curious. I'm curious.
The onus should be really on the trucking industry. It sounds like the trucking industry has done a lousy job conveying this to their customers, saying, listen, this is best practices now. It's no longer 1958. We are plagued with a bunch of thieves, and this has been suggested by the best in the best of the best, that this is what we now have to do in order to prevent crime. Now, I know that, having talked to certain shippers in my life, they don't give a darn, because their attitude is, well,
You got insurance.
yeah, I sell. Well, no, I'm selling my cookies to a guy in the States, and that guy's paying for the transport. The second it leaves my dock, I get paid. So as a matter of fact, I hope somebody does steal those cookies, because I get to sell another load of cookies, that's how people think, unfortunately, which is a lousy way of looking at things.
No, you're right. I'm sorry, Rico, go ahead.
No, I'll let you answer that. I got a follow up though. I got a question.
I was going to say, and we've seen it over the years. Some people are like, hey, what difference does it make? The insurance company's going to pay the claim, and then they'll make more phones, or they'll make more computers. But the thing that's always been a saving grace, there's still a lot of very morally guided people in this country. When they get hit by a theft, a lot of people said, I don't care what it costs. I want to find out what happened.
Yeah.
I want to make an effort to find out what happened, recover the product, catch the bad guys. And thank goodness that still goes on. And I don't think that the cohesiveness of the people doing all this work in our industry, that I base this on what we had in Monrovia. I think we had 259 people there last week, and over 300 registered had to be turned away. The enthusiasm is very, very high. And I think the sharing of information and networking has never been more concise and close as it is now. Never.
Now, who was this? The audience at this event were these people like you, loss prevention officers, as well as police, or were there? Who was there? Were shippers there at all?
Yes, you had some shippers, you had some logistics people, some insurance people, law
Right.
enforcement. Yeah, kind of the cream of the crop of the industry. And then the thing I liked about this year is when there was a question as how many new people are here this year, a lot of hands went up. And when that, then when that happens, then of course there's a lot of redundancy on some of the information you give up, but you have to if they're the first time there.
Right, right.
All that's a learning process for them, and thank goodness all these people that were there this year were younger people that are just getting started in the industry, which is good because a lot of us are, which we kind of laugh as we're starting to get long in the tooth, and we're not going to be around that much longer, so we need to get new people involved.
Right. So
And I
I
guess
got
well, we grew up at a time we were all brought into the industry at a time when people were trustworthy and that people didn't, you could have a loaded trailer left on the street, nobody would touch it, and all sorts of things. And these younger people have been brought into the industry during a time of turmoil, so they don't know anything else. But somebody's going to steal the freight. Let's take some precautions.
Right, and then the great thing about it with technology, a lot of the young people, we've tried to stock our office with young kids that are very adept at computer skills and high
Right.
tech. Is they help us out. I mean, they make putting reports together and graphics and how you explain things much better. Plus, they're familiar with all this stuff. And the thing that's that way throughout the industry. Some of the technologies we're seeing how to combat cargo theft and some of the devices are real game changers. Some of the stuff that we're doing right now, and it's all because of technological breakthroughs. But it's good for us, but it's also good for the bad guys because they utilize it as well. So it's just a different ball game than it has been in the past because of technology.
So earlier when we were talking about how they could be using legitimate carriers to move a load for them. Um, is it possible that they use a legitimate carrier, they go run it all the way through, deliver it, and still the bad guys get paid from the broker for the actual load still, and kind of like a double bonus, so to speak. They managed to steal the freight and also get paid to move the freight, and the poor guy that moved it doesn't ends up getting hung without getting paid at all.
Good question, Rico, because there's a series of answers about that. Different scenarios apply. Sometimes the legitimate driver gets paid, so he's happy. He doesn't care. Yeah, the guy paid me. What do you want to know? What would you take it? So he says. Other times, what we're seeing is this is going on a lot where there might be a company might get assigned 8 loads, and they'll deliver the first 4 without issue. Then they steal the next 4 once they've gained their trust. We just had one last week that we spent all weekend on where there was a dispute about the payment of past loads, but they really weren't due. But this driver had a load that was going to a trade show, and he said, "I'm not going to deliver until you pay me on the past loads." They're like, "Well, they're not due yet." So this went on all weekend, and then he just, we took a chance and paid the guy, and he told us where the load at and it was there. So, but that doesn't always happen. But we're seeing a lot of it as well. And some of these guys don't play that game. They'll bluff that they're going to return your product, but they don't. As soon as they get the money, you don't see them again. So that's why I said there's so many different variations in the question you ask. There's not one
Right.
solid answer because it varies.
Very, very, very intriguing. Very interesting. Um, so also, what since we're talking about it as well, where do you think that most of the players of this thing lies? Is it more just one-offs, or is this more of much more of an organized kind of syndicate, underground syndicate type deal?
Oh, definitely the latter, Rico, because and then there again, I don't want to sound like I'm singling people out for races. It's just what it is, and the people that are most involved in this that we see the most are Armenians that are based out of North Hollywood and Glendale, California, is one group, and then there's a group of Indians that operate with the last name of Singh, which is like Smith in America.
Right.
Yeah, that's
And they operate out of Southern California, and these guys are prolific, and they're the 2 biggest culprits we have. Now you get some of the Eastern Europeans up in Chicago get involved in this, but the bulk of this is being carried out by those 2 groups. And like I said, when we're looking at we get to somebody that will talk, we're finding out that so many of these orders are coming, especially from the Armenians from out of the country, and they'll even laugh about it. We've got them on the phone, so you can't catch us. and they'll just laugh about it. But that's where the hierarchy is. So, like I said, what we're usually getting as far as arrests go is low hanging fruit. So it's kind of frustrating with that.
And not and like you say, not to single anybody out or nothing like that, but I definitely probably field at least, I'm going to say at least 2 phone calls every day from people with those kind of accents, those heavy accents, um, inquiring about dispatch services. Um, I just, that's just me personally. I don't even know, and we're not even going to from, and I'm just singling out with that type of an accent. Now I probably field about 5 phone calls a day total of people inquiring about dispatch services or whatever. But it's just it's I don't know I, they were supposed to have done something to put some teeth behind singling out and trying to run those people out of the industry. And I don't think and I think that the problem is, like you said, is a problem with getting any of the stuff enforced. You know, it's one thing to put a law on the books, but it's a whole nother thing to get it enforced and to get these people out of, get them out of the to run them out of the industry.
Yeah, well, that attack dog has rubber teeth, so everybody knows that.
Well, the thing that's all is problematic is that so many of these brokers that move large amounts of freight, it has a vetting process, and usually it's an automated system anymore. Like they might get a bid from Rico Muhammad, bids on the load. They go, I've never heard of the guy. Then they type in the system. Oh yeah, Rico, he's picked up 5 loads for us, no problem. Then you've been vetted. That will end the vetting process. So you're good to go. They're not going to go and continue to look at other documents, and they're like, maybe your insurance document, which you might have changed, or your email address is going to vary off a digit or two, or your phone number is not the same. But just because you picked up 5 loads with a successful history, to them you're vetted. And I get it because they're busy, they're moving freight, but that's how a lot of this stuff is stepping up. And I see it time after time where they explain, well, we vetted it, we went through our our automated system, and these guys checked out. Would never been an issue before, but now all of a sudden they're that identity's been stolen, and the bad guys have it.
Not a problem till it's a problem.
And then there's also the issue that with the Armenians, there's a group that we have known for a long time. It's been around out there for years and years and years that have changed their name. And we know that they're going out and buying up as many MC numbers as they can. Well, but when they do that, it's hard to trace down things. When you have so many different truckers that you can be assigned to go here and there, catching up to these guys is very, very difficult because, when you're looking at the information that the FMSCA website carries with Safer, that's a compliance website, not an enforcement. So whatever they get, they're going to record into their system, and it could be as fraudulent or as phony as could be. And I'm not criticizing those people, but that's just that's what they do. So when you can't always go by looking up Safer and say, oh yeah, they're good. They've got 3 para units. And they've went so many thousand miles and all that. That information could all be bogus. So
wow, that really makes my antenna go up, Jeff, because literally, and I think I might have shared that email with you, Chuck. Someone emailed me about inquiring about buying my MC number.
Yes,
if I was interested in buying my MC number.
That happens all the time. They're looking for clean MC numbers, and it's funny. They look. You do look as a broker. You do look for a snapshot. Okay, Crescent Carriers Rico. He's got 1 truck, 2 trailers. But then and this happened once with my former company where we worked. We were getting work from somebody who we thought was a shipper who was one of these brokers, and they were getting the work from a large carrier from their brokerage division. It was really convoluted, and they had stolen somebody just like Rico, like that had 1 truck. It was a fellow in Los Angeles area that had 1 truck and worked off the ports. Okay. And they stole his information, went to this large U.S. carrier and represented themselves as that honest carrier. Then they started to tender loads to him. And now this is where they dropped the ball, and they weren't on their game with compliance. How can one single driver, 1 truck, handle 10 loads a day? It's impossible. You know, like I don't care what pills the guy was taking, he couldn't do 10 loads. Like it was impossible. So had they had a proper compliance department, they would have caught that one.
You're
But
right.
it's little things like that. It's one thing is to vet them. What some of the brokers are doing, I know that Traffic's where I found it. I know what we've been or they've been doing for probably the last 3-4 years. There's a compliance team, and they're checking stuff to make sure that it operates as it should, the best practices. But I know that a lot don't. Just like you said, especially some of the medium-sized ones, and even some of the large ones. And I think some of the small guys are probably better at vetting them sometimes because they don't have as many loads, so they're spending more time on diligence.
No, and we see it all the time when where they'll steal a trucker's identity, and when we look at Safer, we're like, well, yeah, that guy, he still looks like he's in the system. He's not. It doesn't say he's out of service. Then when you finally track the guy down, I mean, your first thought, well, this guy's got to be a bad guy. Then you call him, he goes, no, I didn't pick up a load out in Reno, Nevada. Right. And he goes, I've been in operation for 4 years. I've been out of business. So they've intentionally picked that guy's, ID or his identity because they know that what's he going to tell you? First of all, he's not going to be answering the phone because he's not in service anymore. So you have to go to extreme measures to track the guy down, and then you've spent all that time to track him down to find out. Well, hell no, he's retired. He doesn't even run trucks anymore. So yeah, you're on a wild goose chase, and we see that all the time.
Which helps them buy more time to further get rid of the, do away or hide the freight or whatever they're going to do with it.
Exactly. And then the other thing that we're seeing too that has been a problem is depending on where loads being taken. And for a long time that we had a large box store, let's put that away, that has a facility up in Dinuba, California. And so many loads were going up there. Well, what happens is once they get up there and start offloading, they don't have the ability because of the volume of work they're doing to issue the driver a POD at the time of completion of delivery.
Right.
So what happens, the bad guys will fake their own POD, send it to the broker and say everything's fine. Then maybe a couple weeks later, once they've had the opportunity to do the complete piece count, they're going to find they're several pieces short, amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're seeing that all the time. It goes on all the time.
So they're breaking the seal, and then they're putting the seal. Obviously, they're putting the seal back, and then the worst practice I ever saw is when they have a sealed load, and they're telling the driver before he backs in, you go break the seal. Where it's the customer, I know that it best practices of places I've delivered to personally, somebody from the company comes and cuts the seal, not the driver. That's like if there's anything funny going on, you've just given the keys to the hen house to the fox.
Exactly. Well, with these guys, what they're doing is obviously they're picking up the load and then they're taking it and cross-docking it and offloading product. Then, like I said, putting the seal back on it and then deliver it to the consignee,
right?
Being short. And they've done a number of loads like this. We kind of saw this kind of come to a I don't want to say it totally ceased, but it started to slow down. We're seeing that start back up again because we've caught so many of these guys. And that gets into another issue. When you start talking about this group I've talked about out of Fontana, they've hit so many different venues and so many, like some in Tulare County, some in Riverside County, some in Ontario County, some in LA County, some in, throughout the country. Well, if you've got, let's say 15 cases in Riverside County,
right.
20 cases in San Bernardino County, how do you prosecute that? Do you take and then say, well, let's go after the 20 in San Bernardino because we might have a more aggressive conservative prosecutor that understands those type of cases? Because when you've got these spread out hundreds of cases over so many different counties, the prosecution becomes an issue. I think that's why so much of this we've tried to get federal oversight in these because they're spread out in so many different venues. And the same exists with when I told you, I think the last time I was on, about all the trailers being followed with computers. That we had hundreds of those thefts in a year. Same thing. Those are all over different counties. So you've got multiple cases. We know who the guys are, but to prosecute those, there's different philosophies on what's the best way to do it. So in both these groups, the main bad guys have been identified, but yet there's other players that step up and they continue to do it, even though certain guys have been arrested and are a lot of times no longer on the street. So it's just it's almost like a revolving door, and it's not certainly not the fault of law enforcement. I mean, those guys are and gals are out there working their ass off, but it's just it gets frustrating when you arrest one guy one week and the next weekend you catch him right back at doing it again. And
Well, after a while, you know what? And I have friends that are in law enforcement, and it gets to the point. It's pretty disheartening. You risk your life to catch somebody and put the cuffs on them and bring them in, and they're out before you finish your shift. And if that happens a half dozen times, you go, well, what am I risking my life for? Go steal the stuff. Nobody seems to care. Why should I care?
Exactly. And then again, one of the problems is that there's so many of these happening. And like I said, the solar panels are a prime example where the authorities might come across a stolen load in a cross dock, but then it's identifying that product becomes a problem. If you've had 15 loads of solar panels taken in the last 3 weeks, it becomes a process. Which one of these stolen loads is this? How do we identify this?
Are there no serial numbers or anything like that on any of these?
Some things there are, and that's where that's how we got the biggest break with these things. Is that about 3 years ago when this first started, they had one company they'd hit for $3 million worth of theft, and it was mostly done through the short deliveries.
How long a period of time was this $3 million?
Well, I can't give you the exact dates, Chuck, but I can tell you
roughly.
But it involved 26 loads.
Over what period of time?
Less than a year.
Wow.
And at first we thought it was something to do with the broker. So we changed after 13 loads. We got a different broker, and the same thing kept occurring. Two things always happen. The loads arrived late, and they arrived short. So then we knew it wasn't a broker problem. And but luckily, some of the things they stole, they also operated a storefront in Fontana. And the victim was very aggressive. They went in and made some buys on their own. And actually, some of the things they bought were serialized, some weren't. But they had enough items that were serialized, they could trace it on online sales and inside the store to say, no, that's our stuff. That came from that container. That came from that FCL. And that's how this whole thing started. And we started building the case from there. But these guys are just so prolific. And there's it gets kind of funny. I was laughing at the colleague, John Cannon's a good friend of mine, used to be the head of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Now he's in private practice. He called me on a case one time. He goes, well, I think we've got another case where it's this is the Sings. Well, it was funny because the driver was a Sing, but the MO of how he lost his load didn't fit. He'd pulled off into a truck stop. He went out to go into Subway, got a sandwich, came back, and his load had been pilfered. Well, that's the classic MO we'd had of the Ecuadorians. Yeah. So when I talked to the driver, I went and met with him, and he said, he was Sing, but hell, this guy had a big company, had 200 rigs, 200 trailers, and he goes, Jeff, I own the company, and he ended up paying the claim out of his own pocket so he would lose his insurance. So you can't always just go by, it's another Sing, so it's got to be the Sings.
Right, of course.
Just the irony.
Yeah,
right.
So that kind of stuff just happens, and that's why you have to look at each one of these cases individually. It's got its own personality.
We're up in Canada here. We have a large population of Southeast Asia
Correct.
People in the trucking industry. They're all facets of it, and most of them are phenomenal operators. Some are really shady and awful, but you know what? I'd say 90% of the guys I dealt with, great people. In any group, you're going to get a percentage, 5 or 10%. They're going to be the rotten apples, and they always stick out like a sore thumb.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. I remember when I've been up there, as you well know, most of the trucking industry is dominated by Sikhs, and when you go to interview these guys, you shouldn't have a preconceived notion this guy's going to be a bad guy. When you go in there, some of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
Yeah,
some of the hardest working, most honest guys that they're just trying to make a living, and they just, like you said, a few bad apples spoil it for all of them. But most of those people I've met up there are like I said, great people. They want to cooperate. They want to catch bad guys. They want to run businesses and make money and raise their families.
Yeah, you know what? And it's funny because that group is perfect for the truck industry. They get into it because they're all farmers back in the Punjab, and so they're good with equipment because they grow up with it, and they're hardworking because that's what farmers are. A lazy farmer is somebody that's starving. So, and that's why they come to North America, because they see the opportunity here.
So
Yeah.
Jeff, I want to maybe reiterate or go back over some of. Let's talk a little bit more. Let's go back and talk about best practices and things that we can do to kind of, if there's anything new that we can add to some of the things that you've already told us from previous times, as far as what can we do to help protect ourselves, protect our equipment, protect our customers.
Well, I know there's a couple of people I've seen at these conferences that have developed an app that can be used, and I don't fully know how they've showed it to me, but again, it's going to take somebody to enact it. I mean, it's not going to work on its own, and I just don't know how cooperative everybody's going to be. I mean, especially when you get, and I keep harking back to California, even though I'm based here in the Dallas area, I spend half my life out there. It's so common out there to have drivers right off the bat start complaining, "Oh, you're violating my rights. I don't have to show you this. You don't have the right to see my ID and all that." And most places don't have the cojones to say, "Well, you show that, or we're not going to load you. You're going to get this load," but they don't. They usually don't do that. They'll comply and give in. But there's a number of things. I mean, I know some places have went to, this is hell going back 5, 6, 7 years, where they put thumbprint machines in there where they take a guy's thumbprint.
Right.
But always, the ID is always a good thing, because even though it can be a falsified ID, and the same with the plate. I mean, you can take a plate, and it can be a cold plate, or it can be an expired plate. Hell,
Yeah.
a lot of times you'll see a car plate on the back of a trailer. So those things, they're good practices, but they're not 100%. It just depends upon the tenacity of the thief, because sometimes they're very lazy and they do use active plates and different numbers. I just got one I've been working on all weekend, where we had a trucker pick up 2 loads using the same trailer, and we had 2 different victims. 2 different brokers called me on it. And um, when we look at there's some social media things I saw on this guy that he's kind of bragging about. He's the owner of the company. Well, hell, when I started looking at the video, he's the driver. And then when he's stupid enough to take pictures of his surroundings, so you can see the sighting is on his house. When they Google his house, it's the same place. So we know who this guy is. It's just a matter of, so sometimes they're very careless and they like to brag. And that's something about social media's come into play.
I love it.
A lot of these guys want to do the was it TikTok or whatever the nonsense is, but put this stuff on social media and brag about what they've done, which helps out a lot. And because they don't realize that, we're monitoring that kind of stuff. So those are other things to look at. But just going back to try to answer your question, Rico, is having good practices and try to make sure that they're followed, because so many times we get in a case, and sometimes that's great. They've got everything you could possibly ask for, great video. And also, if you've got video, if it's poor, why have it? I mean, it's a waste of time. But these ones where you can actually get very good facial clarity on plates, clarity on placard information. The one I just got this weekend it was great for all that. And also, I think there was such a good shot when the guy's leaning his head out the window. We probably could even done a facial recognition on that. Yeah. But it's just really pretty simple. The best way to prevent it, well, first of all, don't use a load board. That's the start. That's number one. And then when somebody does show up to get your load, follow the best practices. Get all the information you can. Get a copy of his driver's license, the plates off both the tractor and trailer, the unit numbers off both the tractor and trailer, even a VIN number if you can. I mean, that's kind of going to an extreme, but if at all possible, get that, because there's never a case where you have too much information. Because to track these things down, there's just so many things that can be altered or can go wrong. That I mean, even if it's got tracking devices on it, these guys got jammers. They've got ways they can find out if someone's being tracked, and it's just it's an ongoing battle. And also, even with some of the technology, with tracking and certain other types, you've got to be very careful about the information you get, because we just had one that's an active case right now where we used a certain type of tracking device, and it's given us great intel. It's given us like the location of the bad guys and where different places where they've went where the product is. But that particular tracking device might show one address, but it might cover the area of another address. So when you're talking about getting a search warrant, you can't going to get a search warrant when it might be indicating two different places, and it's just an overlay of that tracking device. It's just not accurate enough. Now, there's one piece of equipment out there now that I've worked with. It's phenomenal because it's got an accuracy range of 5 meters. So when you're looking at 5 meters, that's putting you right next door to what what you're looking for, and that makes all the difference in the world. So not all these pieces of technology are created equal, but there's some things out there that can really even the playing field for us when you're talking about information on the bad guys.
How helpful I'm not sure if you can share this information or not, Jeff, but how helpful are like those flock cameras and things of that nature? Do they help you guys out a good bit with trying to track down some of this stuff?
No, good Lord, yes, Rico. One of the best examples I can think of, I had a case down in Louisville, Kentucky. The Kentucky State Police does a great job. Bobby Motley used to head the crew down there, and Steve Spurlock and Gary Thomas are involved there. And Paul Meyer, who now works for us, retired from the FBI. He was in New Albany, and they worked on these. There's a certain faction of the Cubans out of Hialeah that have settled in Louisville, specifically because you've got a T-Mobile, Sprint, UPS, and FedEx distribution centers just south of Muhammad Ali International Airport. So they were going nuts there. And there's a business park down there. And when I had a case a few years ago, by the hard work of those guys I just mentioned, they put these guys away in the joint about 5 years ago. Well, they got out last spring, not this spring, but the spring before. And we noticed they go right back to their old tricks. As soon as I had the first theft by the insurance company, I called Gary Thomas and I asked him, I said, Cubans? He goes, oh, yeah. So I went down there on the case and we started looking into it. And we had some pretty good interior CCTV that showed guys. I mean, we just tell by their methods, there was no doubt it was the Cubans. And then we got a good view of a truck going by, not a plate, but we could definitely tell the make and model. Well, when I started talking to the investigating officer at Louisville PD, I said, man, what we need are flock cameras down here. And he's like, well, probably shouldn't tell you this, but I know you're pretty famous and you're very well known, as I'll tell you. He said, we do have flock cameras. So we started reviewing, and it was kind of funny because we started watching. And if you know how these work, they're very intelligent. The things they do are incredible.
Right.
We found that pickup truck, and he said, the detective said, well, I think that pickup truck belongs to another employee back that works in another warehouse here. And I said, no, wait a minute. I said, bullshit, run that flock camera. And then we got the plate and ran it. Bingo. It was one of our 5 Cubans that we'd known about, which led to I think those guys I think the Kentucky State Police have got a case against them right now. They're getting ready to indict those guys. So yeah, the flock cameras are true game changers. I just had a conversation yesterday on some cases that we're working on in Oakland that then asked, or do we have flock cameras out there? They're like, no, they just signed a contract. They're getting around to it. So not every place is created equal. There might be flock cameras in one place and another place they don't have them. But where they are, Rico, there's no question. They're a true game changer. No doubt about it.
I know they got a ton of them here in Atlanta. So that's.
Yes, they do. You're right. Well, you also, I mean, that you've got one of the most active
hotbeds
there is, and so my good friend Bob Hastings, a lifelong friend, we work together a lot. He's sitting in Atlanta, and he knows that culture as well as anybody.
Right.
Usually I can just call him on a certain day because, oh yeah, that's XYZ gang, or oh yeah, that's the guy just got out of the joint. So he's got his finger on the pulse very well down there.
They all have a certain MO, don't they? Every one of these gangs.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that and usually you get to know how they fence their product, and that's always been a very big key, because so much of the stuff that we're seeing now, like I think I told you this weekend, I worked on 2 cases. I get on Friday that the same guy or the same company, the same trailer picked up 2 different loads, and now we know who owns that trucking company. And when you start putting all that stuff together, and you're seeing that. Then when you contact law enforcement, say, hey, do you know these guys? And then I talked to Gil Gasco, who's a good friend, and he's with California Highway Patrol, one of the most active investigators in the country. Gil goes, oh, yeah, I know who these guys are. He goes, hell, they stole 10 loads last week. So when you're looking at that when you're talking about 10 loads, and then I've got my 2 loads, that's 12 loads in 2 weeks. Can they move that kind of product? I don't think so. That's a lot of product to try to get rid of, because you're looking at different products. You're looking at maybe energy drinks. You might be looking at solar panels. You might be looking at speakers. So, I mean, it's not like, that you've got a And again, they are not doing this as orders because they a lot of times don't know what they're getting. So it's not like,
Right.
oh yeah, we stole that load of speakers because we've got a buyer that wants them. No, they've got to find a way to liquidate that product after they get it.
Right.
So that's why it's so important to know these different cross docks because that's where they're being taken, and they've got to store this stuff somewhere. And that's why, especially all the cargo theft task forces out in LA, whether it be LA City, the cargo cats out of LA County, or CTIP, which is California Highway Patrol, have made a lot of recoveries here lately. I mean, a lot of recoveries. It's because they're constantly going to those cross docks.
So
Jeff,
they're recovering because they can't prosecute it because the law has no teeth. So they're doing a really good job recovering the freight since these guys aren't being taken out. Are there any jurisdictions in the United States that are really strict on enforcing the law? When they catch these guys, they put them away?
Oh, sure. And I mean, it happens right here. I mean, if you're going to do a case here, you certainly want to try to get any charges filed in Tarrant County, which is Fort Worth, as
Right.
opposed to Dallas County, which is in Dallas County. No doubt. I mean, just the way the prosecutors look at things. No doubt about that. And that exists.
It's also because of caseloads too, I guess. One has probably been directed, our jails are full, don't bring any more customers.
Well, but and out in California, they know, like if you're in Fontana, you might have your local prosecutor there might not they might be rather sympathetic towards thieves, or B, might not understand the case very well. So I know, like on some of those I dealt with a detective, he went strictly to the feds and filed federally. So there's those I don't want to call them games, but those nuances are practiced all the time because you're just going to have some people are going to be more pro crime, pro arrest and prosecution than other venues. I mean, no doubt about that.
So technically, with stuff like that, with being interstate commerce, that should be a federal charge or a federal crime.
Used to be.
It should be, Rico, and that's what when most people get victimized, they automatically think the FBI. The FBI, it all depends on. First of all, usually the FBI has a financial threshold that has to be obtained before they'll even look at a case, and that we're talking about in the millions, not the thousands.
Right.
However, certain FBI agents, like my good friend Paul Meyer, when he was in New Albany, as long as he satisfied his terrorism responsibilities, and down in New Albany, quite frankly, there just weren't that many, he could pretty much do what he wanted. And since the Cubans were so active in his area, that's what he worked. I mean, he's like an encyclopedia. When I went down there, he could say, Jeff, if you're looking for a trailer, go check the outer loop here, blah, blah, blah. He could tell you everything because he made his living on doing that kind of stuff. So it all depends. And Miami has always been very active federally because so much of the product ends up down there. Not necessarily stolen from there, but because of the Cubans' involvement in thefts throughout the United States, a lot of product gets taken down there. A lot of stolen equipment goes down there. So the FBI's got a large presence there. But every day, if you just think, well, I had a load of $500,000 worth of computers that cross state lines by theft, doesn't mean the FBI is going to get involved in it. They probably won't.
Yeah, it's funny. Years ago, we had a load stolen. I'm talking like over 25 years, and it was our own driver, and he kind of went MIA. And I said, oh, don't worry about it. The FBI's got a law. It's called tampering with an interstate load. And I called the FBI, and the guy laughed at me. He said, are you joking, buddy? We don't, we're busy catching terrorists. We don't have time for your load.
I was just on the call with a client this afternoon right before we got on, and she was telling me that she was involved in a conference call with an FBI agent who was supposedly be an expert in cargo theft. And she said something about the bolt seal being on the trailer. And the guy goes, what's a bolt seal? And she's like, well, that kind of tells me all I need to know about how much a cargo theft expert you are. So, that, and I'm not making fun of guys, but there's a true nuance to what we do. And I'm not trying to be arrogant.
Right.
Yeah, no.
It truly is. I mean, there's a vernacular. There's things that when you have a very quick conversation with somebody, you start using like a term, an FTL, an FCL,
right?
An LTL. They have no idea what you're talking about because it's something they don't work with every day like we do.
Yeah, it's sort of like it's funny. You was talking earlier. You talking about how like some of the bad guys, how they don't really necessarily need anybody to tell on them because they got social media. They'll tell on themselves and they post everything. and it's been this whole thing with this whole like guru society or whatever I guess you want to call it, where people's trying to sell, like, selling these courses about dispatch services and so on and so forth. And that's a really huge thing that's out there on social media right now as well. And like you said, if once you or talk with someone that has some familiarity within the business, and you start talking the lingo of the business, and you see exactly what it is that they don't pick up on, and that they do pick up on, and what they don't pick up on, and you'll know that you kind of really begin to know this person really doesn't know what the hell they're talking about, and they're really just that's their guru status is basically coming off of selling you some regurgitated information that they found somewhere else,
Right.
but they don't really know they don't have a clue as to what's really going on and what's really happening out here in the real world.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. And I know we're getting closer to the.
Yeah. But go if you want to wrap up on that, I was going to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to join us and come on and talk with us about some of this stuff. We definitely most grateful and appreciate you doing so.
Yeah,
but anything before we get, I guess, any parting thoughts or anything that you would like to leave us with before we get out of here?
Two things. Remember, we're in our busiest theft time of the year because we're getting close to Christmas. So all the shipping, Black Friday's coming up. So yeah, you've got, everything that people want under Christmas trees are going to be being shipped, whether it's UGG boots or electronics, PS5s, Xbox
Right.
360s, all that stuff is being shipped now. So that it's going to be at its highest peak. And the other thing is, when you look at across the country, some of the cargo theft task forces have been restored in California, like CTIP, which is the California Highway Patrol, has got a pretty robust force. Cargo Cats in LA County, all because of what happened when we had all the train stuff there. Now they didn't. The hierarchy didn't realize that was a problem. They thought there were more agents there, so then they realized that they restored that. So they've got personnel back. I think they got down to as many as 2. Now they're up to like 5 or 6. LA City is they got down to no unit. Now they've got a very good unit with like 4 or 5 people. But then that's California. Then you get to other states, it's a totally different ballgame. Nobody in Chicago, in essence, doing cargo theft. You've got a cargo theft task force in Memphis. Nobody in Atlanta. And then no, the GBI got disbanded, which was crazy because when John
Because all you guys in Atlanta are honest, they don't have to worry about it.
Right. So it's just gotten cut. And then you've got a task force in Miami chaired by the FBI. But other than that, that's all the cargo theft experts you have in law enforcement in the United States right now. So these people are underpaid and understaffed. I mean, they just can't keep up. They work their ass off, and I have tons of respect and love all of them, and I work closely with them. But man, they've got almost impossible task with how much they've got to do with the limited amount of manpower they've got.
Man, that is sad. That's truly sad.
We need somebody from the trucking industry in the White House. That would fix the problem.
Well, both these, seriously, we've talked about this. I wish we could get a congressman to come to one of our meetings about we just had last week and sit there and hear all the stories and realize the dollar figure you're talking about with cargo theft. I mean, it dominoes. It's not just the product being stolen. It's the insurance costs of replacement. It's passed on to the consumer.
Right.
But people shrug their shoulders and it doesn't affect me. Well, yeah, it does. It does affect you. But like I said, the people involved that I work with, that we all work together, are some of the most passionate people possible. And there are small victories that we're making. I mean, there are recoveries. There are some times guys are arrested, but man, it's probably more gets away than are caught.
I was just fixing to say, you guys are probably in the lower percentile of on success stories versus how much actually makes it through. And that's sad. That's a sad state of affairs.
Theft is costing all of us, and we're all worried about inflation because you go to buy groceries or buy anything, and it's so expensive. And this is one of the reasons, and it starts with cargo theft. It's not just shoplifters.
You're right.
Yeah.
No,
well, Jeff, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
No, they're just agreeing with Chuck.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, wrapping up, closing out, that like once again, we appreciate you, Jeff, taking the time out, sharing your knowledge with us, giving us some making us aware of some of the things that are going on, so that we can be a little bit more conscious on our end to try to do our small part, however significant that may or may not be. Hopefully, if some people have gained some knowledge and gained some wisdom from this conversation. But we definitely thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come on and join us and chat with us for this past hour. We definitely appreciate it.
Well,
Uh,
listen, it's always an honor, guys. Anytime you want, I'm always glad to spend time with you guys.
Well, we
Listen,
always love having you, man. You don't usually have good news, but it's certainly insightful.
well, you just try to be honest about things. I
I
mean,
know it's
there's
never
good
good
and bad.
news, until you catch all the bad guys.
Right.
well, Jeff, would you like to? I don't know if you want to or not, but if you want to, you want to leave any kind of contact information? How can people
Sure.
find you if they want to ask you
Yeah,
a
I'd like
question
to-
or something?
Yeah, the name of our company is Transit Risk Management, and we're based out of Long Beach, California. And Sam Wadwani runs that office out there. He's a retired ship's captain. And then I'm based in Dallas, but I spend half my life in California, so I can always be reached at in that office. But my personal cell number that's all I use is 817-233-8158. And my email address is jeff@trmus.com. So, and just a little bit about us. I've been so fortunate through the years to develop great relationships with people I've worked with, like, well, you guys. I mean, I met Chuck Snow on a case up in Ontario.
Yep.
And it's the same way it happens when I meet law enforcement officers. I've been so lucky that so many of these guys that I've worked with have come to me and said, "Hey, I'm going to be retiring in the year. I'd like to go to work for you." And I've got about 15 or 16 people like that have been worked in the industry in cargo theft that do work for us. So we've got about 15, 16 contractors that are retired, but they like to keep their toe in the pool. So they're doing 3 or 4 cases at a time, but we don't overwork them because, hell, they are retired. But it works out great because they're very experienced people that know what they're doing and work in cargo investigations.
Well, thanks again, Jeff. Chuck, let the people
If
know.
anybody wants to get hold of me, send me an email, chucksnow280@outlook.com, and include your phone number, because I'll probably end up calling you back. If I can help you with anything, I'll call you regardless. But if I can help you with anything, I certainly will. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back. We're in a hole for another week. And thanks again, Jeff.
You're welcome, guys.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you guys for taking the time out to join us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took a little time to hang out with us, and we are always eternally grateful for you doing so. Thanks again to Jeff Hall for taking time out of his schedule. And thanks again, ladies and gentlemen, to you. So if you guys would do us a big favor, please like, share, and subscribe to the video. That helps us out tremendously, gets us out into the algorithm. And be safe out there, everybody. Stay healthy. Keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. And God willing, we'll talk at the same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night.
Night, everybody.
Catch on the flip flop.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks again.